Okay, so here we go. We're going to get into it. Like I said, back in the day when I first started my account, like you could get away with being like this sort of like general account. Now you have to be like hyper specific, hyper niche, or you have to drive people around you as an individual. So this is something that like Mike at StanceWorks does really well. Chris Clewell does really well. However, Instagram like does not tie to monetization very well. So a lot of these people, if you want to monetize Instagram, you have to do like sponsored posts and this and that. And once again, that creates biased content in my opinion, which I really don't like. I like to be unbiased. So
welcome back to another episode of The Apex. I'm Archie, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Hootie from Valve and Piston. Now Hootie set up the renowned Instagram page back in 2016 and has since grown the account to over 370,000 followers. Alongside curating some of the coolest car content on the internet and building a connection with his global audience, he's also built up a rather tidy collection of cars himself, which include a 1973 BMW 2002 Touring, a 1995 Porsche 911, and his recovery vehicle, which is a 2006 Land Rover Discovery. His recent ventures also include setting up the 24 Hours of Montauk, which is a rally over in Long Island, New York. Hootie, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thanks for taking the time, man. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
That's all good, man. I obviously wanted to start by talking about the cars that I just mentioned in the intro, and specifically your recovery vehicle, the Land Rover, because I saw on your story it on the back of a flatbed lorry.
Yeah. So the Land Rover, Land Rover in general has a spotted track record, and when I went to go buy this, I did do some diligence around like what would be the most reliable. So I bought an LR3 or a Disco 3, as you mentioned, intentionally because they're built from 2006 to 2009. They were owned by Ford, so the entire drivetrain is a Ford product. And if there's a problem with your Disco 3, you can go get parts from a Ford dealership, which is kind of amazing. And those drivetrains will last like 300 to 400,000 miles. But in typical Land Rover fashion, just has electrical issues and stuff like that. And to be fair, I did just park the truck last year. So last year, my wife and I moved. We were temporarily in Vermont. We bought a house in Connecticut, and I just like dropped the truck. So I just like put it in a garage. I did not, didn't do anything that you're supposed to do if you're going to leave a car for a year, thinking that I would be back like a month or two later to come pick it up. Now, my wife and I had a kid a month later, and like I just like forgot about this truck. So I went back last week, which was like almost exactly a year later, and just like batteries flat, lots of Christmas tree on the dash, like transmission wouldn't go into drive. So I had it towed down to the house, which was in some way always the plan. And AAA Premium, shout out to them. They give me one annual 200-mile tow. And I used it on the Land Rover, and the distance between the two houses was 187 miles. So it was like just under that 200-mile limit, which is phenomenal. But yeah, that truck's been great. I've had a bunch of great experiences with it. Obviously built it up. It's like a fully kitted off-roading truck. I got it back down to my house here. There's a couple of things I want to change and get it into good shape. And then it's going to be up for sale. So, if a custodian wants a fully kitted Land Rover, I don't know how we'll get it over to you, but we can put it up for sale.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I suppose what was the inspiration behind the BMW and the Porsche? Why those two cars?
Yeah. So, so oddly enough, I've always been a really big BMW fan, like a classic BMW fan. My dad grew up driving 2002s. My uncle and him owned a 74 2002, which is what I learned to drive manual on. Yeah. And I loved the ethos behind BMW, the BMW motorsport brand. The aggressive styling that they had, the fact that the E28 M5 was like the fastest sedan on the planet, like all these things, like I was enamored by it. So, my first car was an E36 M3. I've had a couple E30s, built one into a track car with my brother. I owned an E34 M5, and I always wanted a 2002. And, this was in 2015. I was just browsing eBay. At the time, I had an E34 M5. I bought it from the original owner in Palo Alto, California. I lived in San Francisco at the time. And I found this 2002 Touring, which I'd never seen a touring version of the 2002 before. They didn't get shipped to the US. And this one was like totally built, it has an S14 engine, dogleg transmission, Frankenstein of BMW parts. I actually have the binder sitting on my desk because I was looking up brake parts for it. And you literally have to go, it's all in German. So I just use Google Translate, or I'm like Googling part numbers to figure out like what brakes it has. So, but I found on eBay, it was owned by a collector down in Orange County.
Right.
And I went and bought it. And, that car is like a total unicorn car in terms of the parts it has on it, in terms of the way it drives. It's like a 1,900 pound go-kart. And so I bought it. I then moved to New York and I brought the car with me for a year. I stored it in my brother's garage. He was like, you need to get this thing out of my garage. So because he only had a one car garage. So I sold it back to the guy who originally imported it. And like within a month, like I was like regretted that decision. So I just like texted him every single month for like a year and a half. Then finally he sold it back to me. So shipped it back. And then now I have it again. So that one, I just always loved BMW. So I just like, I need to have a classic BMW. And Porsche, when I lived in San Francisco, and actually before I bought the 2002, I was looking for another car, clearly.
Yep.
I was looking at 911s because I was like, okay, like I like this ethos behind the brand. It's very motorsport derived. It's very like moddable cars. Like I like that component of it. And so I wanted an air cooled because I think that's the more, that embodies like my style of car, like that classic, the less complex mechanical car, instead of being water cooled and all that other stuff. And so I originally bought at the time I bought the 74 2002 and that was great. But then a few years later, I bought a 79 911 SC hot rod, which was a sort of built out engine to a 3.2 carb, no interior, roll cage, race harnesses, stuff like that. And I had the interior refinish and stuff. But that like ended up being like really aggressive. And I owned that car when I lived in New York City. And so my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, we would go on these like 3 to 4 hour drives. And like, you know how small the inside of that car is. You're sort of like 6 inches and you couldn't even hear the person to the, in the passenger seat. Yeah. And there's no AC, no radio, nothing. And so like, I think at one point we drove from New York City to Cape Cod. And when we arrived there, like my ears were ringing and I was like, this thing has got to go. Like, it's just not a good. So I actually traded that car to my friend and got his 993. So he had my 993. So the 993 has interior and stuff. And while no engine modifications outside of like exhaust, I can talk about that later if you care, but it's been lowered and has like different wheels on it. And so it has sort of like a little bit, I changed the shifter and stuff like that. But it's still like compliant to drive, is better to drive. So, and then the 993 is still air cooled, but it's like sort of the most advanced version. So it has like the best creature comforts. Like I've always wanted a long hood too. So maybe I'll pick one of those up in the future. But anyway, like Porsche and BMW both have this sort of same like motorsport derived moddable, culture about them. Yeah. And I really like that about cars. Obviously I like to mod my cars. I like to buy driver cars. I don't want to buy like a 2,000 mile example that needs to sit on pillows in a garage. And like, what am I doing with this thing, paying insurance for it for 20 years to get some like meager return? I'll go buy Google stock or, some index and, never have to like change the oil on that. Right. And it'll probably return me better. And it doesn't take up space. Right. So,
and I suppose getting into obviously Valve and Piston, was that then, did you set that up to sort of connect with fellow enthusiasts? So what was the intention there?
Yeah, the intention. So I started the account in January of 2016. So it's been over 8 years. Okay. And the intent behind Valve and Piston was really sort of a way to evangelize like what I found beautiful and pretty about cars and car culture. So I sort of like, and the account is sort of a curation, right? Yeah. A lot of the content is not my own. I obviously give credit to all the photographers or videographers that take the content, but I really just want to showcase like what I find pretty about cars. And it could be something as simple as like the NACA ducts on a Ferrari F40, or it could be, like the arches of a Jaguar E-Type, all these different things that I think like a lot of people just see cars as something that purely functional, like it gets me from point A to point B. But in my opinion, like this is functional art. It has a static beauty to it, which is like in sort of, parked somewhere. And then it also has a dynamic beauty to it. So like, how does it sound? How does it smell? How does it drive? And so I like to like infuse both of those things into my account. And then with the distribution I have now, I can sort of become a little bit more of a megaphone for the things that I really like. I think one thing that's different about the account, and this is something that I've tried to hold true from the beginning, is that the account is not like, it's not my job, right? And I don't monetize it, and I don't, it'll never like compare to my normal income. So like I can be unbiased in that way. And I am not at the whim of, a sponsor or saying something that will make a sponsor upset. And so I can be a little bit more honest with folks. And I think that's a advantage that I have that I definitely flex. And sometimes it, pisses the audience off, but it's like an unbiased opinion, right? Yeah. And this could be something as simple as like, hey, what torque wrench should I buy? Right. I'm not sponsored by Snap-on. I'm not sponsored by Craftsman. I'm not sponsored by Matco. So like I can objectively find the best torque wrench in different price ranges and let my audience know, or any sort of thing, car cleaning products, wheels, specific products for cars. So I try to be very unbiased in that point of view.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously you talk about it's not your day job, and there's benefits to that. But I mean, obviously the account has grown enormously, 370,000 followers. That's a hell of a lot. What was it like in the early days though? I mean, I'm trying to remember what Instagram car content was like in 2016. I mean, how quickly did the account grow?
There's a specific advantage starting an account back when Instagram was nascent, right? Because Instagram was growing so quickly that you would get the tailwinds of new entrants, right? That new users joining Instagram. So like, I don't know what Instagram's user count at the time was, but let's just say it was 100 million. And let's just say today it's 1 billion. Yeah. I'm just making these numbers up. I have no idea. So Instagram's user growth would then 10x from 2016 to now. If you start an account, like your account should also have 10x, just, if it's normally distributed, which it probably is. And so I think back then, like you could really get away with being a broad account because there weren't that many like car specific accounts. So like if you were just broad, you could capture like these like people who like cars. And I think now you really have to be very specific in what you're what you're doing, and your style. Maybe it's around a particular car type. Maybe it's around a particular type of content. Like, one account that is doing really well, and I give him a shout out all the time. This guy named Roman runs it. It's called Patina Research. Yeah. So he has a very specific style, which is like he blends music with like vintage racing footage or obscure car footage. And I think like that niche would never survive in 2016. It's just like too narrow, right? Like people would be like, well, what the hell is going on here? Yeah. But it works now because all of the other niches have been explored, right? Yeah. And this is one that hasn't been explored. Okay. In terms of growth, like I think the biggest thing you can do to grow an account, I've said this time and time again, and it's just like post content regularly. Like there's this meme that's like, it's like this guy who's reading a book and it's like, what do I have to do to make money? And like, he opens up the book and it's like work. And then he's crying in the last slide. And it's like, it's just like post regularly. Like that's all you have to do. And like, if your content's good, like you'll get out there. And if not, then you'll learn from your posting as to like what you should do. Yeah. And that's what I did. And I'd post once or twice a day for 8 years. And that's kind of like where you get. But yeah, just posting regularly has been like probably the most consistent means of growth. And I made some tweaks over time where like my rate of growth would like get higher. Yeah. But then like Instagram algorithm would change and then I'd have to readjust and do some other stuff. But like, yeah.
Okay, it's interesting. I always find that like nostalgia on Instagram seems to like there seems to be a strong sort of emotional resonance with that. Is that something that you sort of tapped into as well? Obviously, the consistency is there, but also the type of content you're posting.
I think I did it unintentionally.
Yeah.
I just posted the things that I liked about cars. Like I didn't go out and say like this account is gonna be a nostalgic account. But to your point, like Instagram really has become an evangelist for nostalgic items, and whether that's cars or whether that's watches or whether that's other categories, it really has done that. And I think the reason why is because Instagram in its early days was only photos. This was back before even video existed. And so you would see these static photos of, a vintage watch or a vintage purse or vintage furniture or vintage cars. And it looks so like pretty and cool. And it's got like this like whole allure and aesthetic. And that like really like warms people's hearts. It's like makes you feel good. Right. And in reality, like, it's not always that good. Right. Like these things require care. They definitely require more care than buying something new. They're old. They're made on like materials or parts that are less reliable than what you could have today. And so I think it sort of really opened up the aperture for people to want this nostalgic aspect in their life. But I don't know that everyone was like prepared for what that means. Right. So I have so many friends over the years have asked me like, Hootie, like, I really want to buy a classic car. Like, what should I get? What should I get? And I'm like, give them a suggestion and they'll be like, well, like how much is that like, how much is that going to really like, is that going to be a problem? Do I have to like maintain that a lot? And I'm like, yeah, like you're not going to have AC working all the time. Yeah. The thing's not going to start. Yeah. Buy a set of tools. Like you'll figure it out. Like, and then they immediately like sort of turn around. But I think on Instagram, they're like, oh, I see this like Series 1 Land Rover parked on Bond Street in New York City. And they're like, oh, that'd be so cool if I own one of those. And then they go buy one and they're like, this thing doesn't go faster than 40 miles an hour. Like this thing creaks and rattles and it leaks water when it rains. And it's like, well, yeah, it's like basically a tractor that you should not be driving around. And then you get people that are sort of stuck with these things.
So I suppose the broader question there is like, what role do you think like social media plays in terms of like influencing car culture? Because in my view, it's like, I think it influences people's tastes, opinions, the cars they aspire to own. Do you think that's fair to say?
Absolutely. And I don't mean to say that like social media is like only bad, right? I think that once again, this is like a bell curve. And there are people who care just about the nostalgia and not really about the cars. But then there are people who, through social media, get to learn about this stuff and they become enamored with it. And maybe they liked vintage watches and now they like vintage Porsches, or maybe they like furniture and then they like this, it's like you can pull from other areas where people are passionate about and really care and understand the care that an old thing requires. So I don't mean to say it's always bad. I would say the one thing that social media has done is like it's expanded the market, right? It's really sort of like, these are really things that like you would find on the forums. Like when I was like 12 years old, I was on Bimmer forums and I was like reading everything on Bimmer forums. And like, that was like the only place where you could get like, oh, like you can modify your E36 M3 with like LTW wheels. And like, this is the suspension that you want. And these are the lights, but there was no like broadcast mechanism where like you just open up your phone on Instagram and go to your Explore tab. And maybe you are all into, golden retrievers. And all of a sudden an E36 M3 pops up and you're like, oh, that's neat. Like, look at the clear side markers and look at the LTW wheels. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like there was no like discovery that existed. It was all like just held in these like little secret forums, which is kind of awesome. But now you've like opened up the market, and the problem is like all of these stuff is limited, right? There'll never be another 1983 Rolex made. There'll never be another F40 made. And so prices for this stuff have just like sort of gone up really precipitously because demand has increased and supply has stayed the same.
No, it's interesting because sometimes I wonder, like, obviously as you said, I'm a bit of a Porsche guy. Like I'm kind of a big fan of like 996s, and I wonder sometimes, like, if I'd never joined Instagram, would I feel the same way about them? Do you know what I mean? At what point is it's not a bad thing at all, but just sort of recognition of that, that it does have quite a big impact in terms of what people like aspire to own or influencing their tastes.
And this is something that I try to incorporate into the account, like when I'm curating content, right? If you think about the adoption cycle of these ideas, right? Idea adoption. I kind of want to curate things like on the earlier side of that, right? So like, I want to be like, if I post like Oilstainlab's car, I know you talked with the Bryden brothers. I want to be like the early one to post that car, and then people are like, oh, that's really cool. And then they sort of see it everywhere. Right. But you definitely don't want to be, and not to say that Oilstainlab is going to experience that. I think that they're going to do really well. But like, I don't think you want to be on the late side of that. That thing, because then you just become an account where it's like, oh, I saw that on a different account like earlier. Right. So you kind of want to be on the earlier side of that. And even though that might not, like, I think, if this is your idea adoption cycle, like posting things at the peak is going to get you the most like likes or engagement or whatever. Like, I think you have to like diversify your content across that stream so that you constantly have new ideas. So like the people who are really innovative, who follow you, like they're going to follow you for that stuff on the early side of the curve. And then you have a sort of mass appeal at the top. Right. So it's something that I definitely try to think about. Like, I can't just post Ferrari F40s and F50s all day, right? It's like that gets just like, I'd kill myself. I'd shut down the account, right? So
I suppose then, if you were to set up Valve and Piston today, like how would you approach it? What would your?
I actually wouldn't create an Instagram account. I create a YouTube account, and my YouTube account would be, I really like working on cars, as you know, for my stories. So here we go. We're going to get into it. Instagram, like I said, back in the day when I first started my account, like you could get away with being like this sort of like general account. Now you have to be like hyper specific, hyper niche, or you have to drive people around you as an individual. So you need to post as you as an individual, and people follow you for you as an individual. So this is something that like Mike at StanceWorks does really well. Chris Clewell does really well. Alex, he now works at FCP Euro, but he does these like crazy BMW projects. He does really, and then there's a bunch of other people, Chris Harris, like all these people, Matt Farah, they all drive it to them as an individual largely. And that's what you have to do to create this sort of like unique content, right? Stradman, all this other stuff. However, Instagram like does not tie to monetization very well. So a lot of these people, if you want to monetize Instagram, you have to do like sponsored posts and this and that. And once again, that creates biased content, in my opinion, which I really don't like. I like to be unbiased. So the thing about YouTube is YouTube aligns views with monetization really well, right? So if you have like a good subscriber base, you can sort of monetize these things. And the most interesting stuff on YouTube, in my opinion, are the things that have evergreen content in them, right? So when you typically post something to, whether it's Instagram or YouTube or whatever, you get a lot of initial views, and then that sort of drains over time, right? And that like long piece there is what's called a tail. So in my opinion, like you want to try to find pieces of content that have fatter tails, right? So like you get like a lot of like evergreen views. I think people that do this really well are Doug DeMuro with his car reviews. I think Larry at Ammo does this really well, right? Because like if you want to like detail your car, he might have a video on how to get like rubber off your car, how to get some, something off your car. And that video is going to have really fat tails, because when you search it on Google, it's going to pop up at the top. Or like Doug DeMuro, I want to buy a 2002 Honda Odyssey. He's probably reviewed one. Like I can search and then it'll come up, right? But something like a Whistling Diesel, and I love Whistling Diesel, I think his content's like crazy and ridiculous. Like that doesn't have like as fat of tails, in my opinion, right? So it's like sort of like this like content that it really decays quickly. So I want something that has fatter tails. And what I would do is I love working on cars. I love like fixing cars. Sometimes to my own.
You look pretty handy with a spanner.
To my own hatred. But what I would do is I basically would create an account that like buys cars, fixes them up myself,
Yeah.
and then like sells them afterwards and just goes and then just try to like level up to crazier and crazier cars. And I think like one day you could have some like exotic car, like some Diablo or something. It's like change the oil on a Diablo. And like, that's like really sort of interesting. And so you blend this content together. Is sort of how I do it. So it sort of hits all those pieces. One, it's content that includes myself as an individual. Two, is content that aligns with monetization. Three, it's content that has fatter tails. And four, and most importantly, it's content that I like, that I would be happy to produce consistently. So I think that's what I would ultimately create.
Yeah, no, it's similar to sort of like the channel you kind of just described. I mean, it reminds me of Matt Armstrong. I don't know if you're familiar with his content, but he's sort of buying these sort of crashed cars, fixing them up, and he's built this incredible collection of cars now. But actually, your sort of Whistling Diesel point's interesting as well, because, you know, like the one thing I see on YouTube as well is like, I love YouTube, and I think it's a fantastic platform. And with like Whistling Diesel's Cybertruck video, the production on that video was insane. I mean, if you watch the opening of that video, it's literally like a movie. It's like the scale of production on YouTube videos is going through the roof. Like where they're going to be in 5-10 years is insane.
So that's probably the hardest part of cracking into YouTube right now. Is like you really need like a multi-person production team. So like to get off the ground, like 10 years ago, all you really needed was a camera, right? And not even like a nice camera. And now you need like multiple people, and shout out to those folks on YouTube who don't have like, you know, I think like Stradman like used to have someone help him, and now he just does it himself again. Obviously like Mr. Beast being the most successful YouTuber, like he has a full team, employs a bunch of people. And so you really need like high production quality.
But then I mean, you know, you've got the like Marcus Brownlee as well, and I think his autofocus channel, like they specifically make their videos on an iPhone or like a smartphone or something to demonstrate like the tech element of it. But it's interesting. YouTube's an interesting platform, right? But I think at the end of the day, like it boils down to there'll always be a demand for great quality content that's authentic, and you know what I mean. It's you can't escape from those sort of key ingredients. They sort of underlie the whole lot. It's interesting. And talking of sort of I suppose recent ventures and what you might be doing, you have kicked off the Montauk Rally, which I'm keen to learn a bit more about. Could you touch on sort of what that actually is and why you set that up?
So this is kind of in part it has something to do with, obviously it has to do with Valve Piston because I created it through that account, but you know, Valve Piston lives online, it lives digitally. And so this is really sort of like an in-person, I want it to be an in-person event that was very curated. Anyway, the 24 Hours of Montauk, obviously play on 24 Hours of Le Mans. It's a rally that I host every summer with my friend Rory. We've done it 2021, 2022, 2023, and then the 2024 rally is in 2.5 weeks. So we do this every September. It's an event. It's held the day before this car show called The Bridge. The Bridge is held on Saturday in Bridgehampton, and we do ours the day before. And essentially, it's a car meet in the morning. It's invite only. It's a car meet in the morning. Everyone comes, parks their cars. We have coffee. We have pastries and stuff. We do a drive, and we get to an end location where we have lunch for everyone. We have sort of gifts and stuff. And the event has gotten sort of like more and more complex every year. In my opinion, better and better every year. More complexity doesn't necessarily always mean better, but we've now brought in like core sponsors for the event, which is pretty cool. So last year, I won't reveal who the sponsors are for this year because we haven't revealed that yet. Maybe by the time this airs, people know. But last year, we partnered with Leica, the camera manufacturer. We partnered with La Marzocco. We partnered with a watch brand called De Bethune. And we integrate them into the event. So like Leica, at the beginning of the event, they gave everyone loaners, like cameras, so they could shoot on Leicas throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, they actually gave away an M11 camera. So it was like a $20,000 camera and lens combo. La Marzocco was serving espressos or cappuccinos from the back of a Unimog, which is kind of crazy. And we like drove that truck with their machines in the back. De Bethune, they make these like really expensive watches, like $100,000 plus watches. And so they brought like 6 of those watches and strapped it to people's wrists for the day. And so people could like enjoy it. So it's gotten crazier and crazier. It's about 50 cars. And we really try to curate the event. And you might ask, like, why do you do this? Well, one, the first reason is I sort of talked about this before, is like cars have like both static beauty and dynamic beauty.
Yeah.
And car shows are great, right? I think everyone, loves them, but I think car shows really only exhibit the static beauty of cars. So this event, the bridge, they get like really amazing cars there and, multi-million-dollar cars, but they kind of just like come in on a truck, they go off, they go sit on the lawn, and you can enjoy their static beauty, but then you don't really get to see these things drive. So I was like, why don't we create a driving component to this weekend where you can enjoy both the static beauty, but also the dynamic beauty for those that want to drive their cars. And that's what we strive to do. And the owners of those cars that bring their stuff and they want to exhibit, they want to drive their cars, we allow them to do that. And it's to the extent that like last year we had this collector, his name is Jas Dhillon. He brought his Porsche 962, like this Leighton House teal livery 962. This was like an actual Le Mans car that like raced at Le Mans. It was driving on our rally. And like, when are you ever going to see a 962 on the street? It's like absolutely crazy. Like you see this thing go through a small town in the Hamptons, like through Sag Harbor, and it's like every head turns, it's like the craziest thing. So like that's kind of the cars that we want to embody there and display their dynamic beauty. The second thing that we really want to do is we're trying to bring together the reason why we sort of curated and it's invite only and all this other stuff. And we really try to curate. So, some of the people there are like dedicated car people, but like a lot of car people are like me, where like cars are like your hobby that you're really, really passionate about, but you're oftentimes like professionally for your career doing something else. But you're like, if you have really nice cars, you're typically really good at your career. You're sort of top notch. And so we try to bring these people from these different areas, whether it's artists like Daniel Arsham or watch experts like Ben Clymer, Enery, Vincent Brasesco, Justin Reese from Watchbox, or whether it's finance people or tech executives. We try to bring these people who are experts in these other crafts, but everyone overlaps in cars. And because we really spend a lot of time curating this, obviously we bring dedicated car people too, but like, because we spend a lot of time really curating this, I think you get like interesting collaborations that you wouldn't otherwise see. And we've done this 3 years now, 4th year will be this year. And we've seen people that we invited that didn't know each other in earlier years, and they have since collaborated on things because of this event. They met there, they've connected, and that's like a really special thing for us. So, that's kind of what we strive to just make it like a really like sort of laid back day, but with a bit of driving and a bit of socialization.
And I suppose it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a kind of conscious Valve and Piston is very online, but let's not forget that we also love to just meet up and go for a drive, right? That sort of online versus offline, balancing the two kind of thing.
Right. It's like bring all of these connections that we have digitally. Like I comment on your pictures and you comment on my picture, but like let's bring us together in real life at an event that we're all already there. And so we sort of will do it. And, I think the first year we did it, we only had like 10, 11 cars there. And that was like, we're really sort of like a trial run, get the blessing of the Bridge founders. And they've been very supportive of us. And then now I think this year we have like 60 cars. That'll be like 120 participants, not including sponsors. We have like dedicated content people coming. It's like a whole thing, right? So we have like real sponsors. Like sponsors that I dreamed of having like multiple years ago, and like now they're here. So like we'll have like it's pretty crazy, and it'll be really, really fun. So that sounds pretty epic, and I look forward to seeing pictures of it. I'm sure you'll post about it on Valve and Piston. Of course.
That sounds cool. Well, I'm keen, before I ask you some quick fire questions, I actually wanted to pick your brain on sort of are there any trends that you're seeing in the automotive world at the moment that are getting you pretty hyped up and quite excited?
Yeah. This is sort of on the last topic around 24 hours. I think the trend that's getting me most excited. Okay, so I'll preface this. Instagram has evolved a lot over time. Obviously, I spend a lot of time on Instagram, so I'm most familiar with that social platform. Other social platforms have evolved too. But Instagram, if you look at your feed right now, you go to your feed, most of the content in your feed is not actually people you follow. Right? So your feed has effectively become your old Explore tab. And you go to your Explore tab, like I don't even know what that is now. And then you go to your stories and that's like kind of who you follow, but like the ordering is like totally arbitrary as to like what content you see. And I'm sure like Instagram says like, oh yeah, this increases engagement on the whole. So like the concept of that Instagram used to be this chronological feed of people you only follow has really broken down. And it's gotten to the point where like, I don't even like people might post things and I like miss it because I don't see it in my feed ever. And that like upsets me. So like, that's part of the reason like why 24 hours I think is so successful is because like people just want that, like these are the people that they want to see. So they want to see them there and they don't care if that content got 2 likes or they don't care if it got 1,000 likes, right? They wanted to see what their friends are up to. And there are other events that are popping up around this. And I think someone who does it really well is the Overcrest production guys. So they created the Overcrest Rally. Chris Clewell is the guy I know best there. And their host, like they put so much effort into this. Like Chris will go do a scouting trip of like a week-long scouting trip, really find the best roads, mark everything down. And then they have an application for it. So, it's invite only, you just can't, all these things are limited by space ultimately, which we're limited by space. We want to expand it every year, but we are. And they really host like this really interesting event. And I haven't had the ability to join one just because I've had conflicts every time, but they're hosting in Arkansas this year, that they host in Utah one year. And I think they really put on a good event. And similarly, I think like other events like this are doing really well. Like I think Goodwood is a good example of that, where like popularity is increasing. And there are other driving events. People have asked us to do rallies like around Monterey Car Week. They've asked us to do rallies around Amelia Island. And so I think people are really yearning for like physical connection and physical experience. And I think like people are getting like a little bit Instagrammed out or digital. The digital relationship only goes so far. So I think that's probably one of the most trends I'm most excited about, even though that's not really like a digital trend per se.
To round up, I was going to ask you some quick fire questions to finish on.
Sure.
They are, pretty quick. So modern or classic cars?
Classic.
Who's your racing hero?
Ayrton Senna. You can see this.
Oh yeah, you got the. Oh yeah, I don't know if how your flexible your camera is, but that is. That's your. Is it? Yeah, was it a 1/18 scale?
1/8 scale.
1/8 scale. Oh wow,
it's like 2.5 feet long. It's made by D'Agostini, which is a. It's made by D'Agostini, which is a die-cast company. They actually send you kits every month. It's like for like 18 months they send you pieces and you build it. I bought this one already built from Japan because the kits aren't made anymore. I actually reached out to D'Agostini. I thought this was such a good idea and their marketing was so terrible. And I was like, please, just like, I want to work with you because I need more people to know about this. Like you're the best kept secret. And like, they responded to me and we had like email back and forth and then they just like ghosted me. And I'm like, you guys are just like fumbling the bag here. Like I posted this story about this.
Yeah.
I got like hundreds of messages, like people asking me like, what is that? Like, I want that. I need it for my office. And then like, I had to dig for hours and hours and hours. I looked at Tamiya sets. I look at high detail sets. Like D'Agostini makes 1/8 scale stuff. And like, they just like, if you're listening to this D'Agostini, which you probably aren't, like, respond to my email.
Oh man, no, it's cool. Yeah, a sucker for a good model or a good poster. Yeah, definitely. If you can keep only one car from your collection, which one is staying?
2002. Everything else can be replaceable. I think that's the only one that I cannot replace it. It like And that's why when I sold it back to the guy, I had bought that car and then I sold it, then I bought it back again. And when I sold it, I regretted that. And I, really went on a pursuit to get it back. But, this car is like the craziest mix of like BMW parts that would take, once again, like you can kind of tell what I like. I like things that where someone has clearly spent a lot of time thinking about something. It's like, I get to like get that at such a discount. Like that is like, to me, what I really enjoy, whether that's content or knowledge or whether that's objects. And, this car is like, has X5 front brakes, E28 calipers, like has a certain bracket that this person, do you know how many hours of testing it would take to even like come up with this craziness? Like, it's insane. Like, and then that's just like the brakes. And then every single part of this car is like been tweaked and customized and changed and adjusted with different spacers, and everything has such a tight tolerance. It's like, you just can't replicate that. I could replicate my 993, or I could go buy a 993 RS or whatever. I can't replicate that.
Yeah. And what's in your dream 3-car garage?
Ford GT40. Probably the road going version. There's like a light blue road going version with like wire spoke wheels. Ferrari F40, non-cat, non-adjust. And I think I'll go with the 2005 Carrera GT.
Ooh.
Yeah. All black, preferably.
All black? Including
with
the
black wheels, yeah.
Black wheels as well?
All black. I think I could go silver on natural, which is like the press photo colors.
Yeah.
But I think there's just something so interesting about like a like black looks really good on that. It's just like, it's maybe not. I mean, I'm not picky, whatever you want.
Yeah, no, that's a hell of a dream garage, man. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Hootie, and thanks for your time. And I suppose the best place for people to follow you and find you is Valve and Piston, right? And it's just
Valve and Piston. Yeah. If you shoot me a DM, I almost always respond to them. So yeah, ask me questions, whatever, connect.
Yeah, fantastic. And yeah, if you're listening to this and you want to learn more about Custodian as well, you can do so at www.custodian.club. We're also on Instagram at custodian.club. We've recently launched insurance as well, so I'm sure if you're listening to this, that probably applies to many of you. It could be of interest. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. Hootie, thanks again for your time. And I'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks, Archie.
Hootie. Thanks, man.